Good evening, all.
Good evening.
Can you hear me okay?
Yep, you're good.
Awesome. So who was not here last week?
I wasn't.
One.
Victoria and Jessica.
Okay. Cool. Well, the first 2 weeks, we talked about the evidence of the resurrection of Jesus, right? Because I believe that Christianity kind of hinges on that. If Jesus did not raise from death, like Paul said, we're basically wasting our time. I wouldn't be here right now in Chicago doing this, and we might be in Florida on the beach right now. We wouldn't be here. Just this is what we want to study this. And then the last week we talked about what is he doing today, which we're going to talk about briefly. Just kind of a quick review of last week. For me, the best evidence has been feeling him work in my life, and I want to talk about that this evening. Kind of how can we do that, and what are some verses that might help us? Speaking of that, the reason I'm in Chicago, I'm doing a project with Ray and Dana's son, Simeon, called Rest of Our Lives. You can check it out online, restofourlives.com. And I'm in Chicago right now helping film a gentleman named Milad from Iran. That's where I'm staying this evening. And in a few months, you'll see his story on restofourlives.com, where he had to escape Iran over these mountains on a horse because he believed in Jesus, because he believed Jesus is alive. And he has certainly felt Jesus work in his life and felt the power of Jesus being alive, and really didn't fear death when he was in prison twice and escaping the mountain. But like I said, if you check out the website, in a few months, you'll be able to hear his story from him. So last week we talked about how Jesus is our high priest today. We talked a little bit about what that meant. Just a quick review. I'm paraphrasing these verses. You're welcome to turn them up or write them down. But we talked about how Jesus Christ did not exalt himself, right? We talked about how God did. God appoints a high priest. God is the one who exalted Jesus. When that word exalt means to magnify or to honor. We talked about that in Hebrews 5:4-5. We also talked about yesterday how last week, that Jesus was tempted in every way like we are. I mean, and that it's really helpful for me recently to really wrap my brain around that. In every single way, like I am tempted today, he has been. And we didn't talk about this last week, but God cannot be tempted. James 1:13, and it's one of the many reasons God sent his son. I love that, right? Thank God that he sent his son to experience everything that we experience, because God can't be tempted. We talked about how because Jesus suffered when he was tempted, he can help us when tempted. That's also one of my favorite verses. Because God is not tempted, so he doesn't suffer in that way. So Jesus can help us when we're tempted. We talked about in Hebrews 7:25 that Jesus is able to save to the uttermost. That means completely those who draw near to God through him. We talked about how, being in God's presence can be dangerous. He's, of course, very powerful. So that's why he would appoint priests. That's why he appointed Aaron and his family to come near him on behalf of the people. We didn't talk about this last week, but Hebrews 13:13 says, let us go to him outside the camp. So just like the animals were sacrificed outside of the camp and brought in by the high priest, actually, if we can turn to that, if you like, Hebrews 13. Because animals were brought outside the holy places by the high priest, Jesus also suffered outside the gate, it says in Hebrews 13, verse 12. I believe that means he suffered outside of the gates of Jerusalem. That's where he died in order to sanctify the people through his own blood. In Hebrews 13:13 says, therefore, let us go to him outside the camp. In the second half of this verse says, bear the reproach he endured. As many of us may know in this room, being a disciple, a follower of Jesus, is not always easy. It's not a bed of roses. So it's you're going to him, and we're trying to be different from everyone else in the world. What's that?
Somebody else is logged in. If somebody else is logged in, could you just mute the sound, please? Okay. Whoever that was must be okay now.
Yeah, so Hebrews 13:13, let's go to him outside the camp. This brings glory to his Father because, like we just talked about, God exalted Jesus to this place of our priest. And it won't be easy sometimes to come to Jesus and to follow Jesus. We didn't talk about this verse last week, but Jesus is the one who died. More than that, who was raised, who is at the right hand of God, who indeed is interceding for us. The second half of the verse, Hebrews 7:25 says, he always lives to make intercession for us. Does anyone have an idea of what this word interceding means? We talked about it briefly last week.
Like come alongside?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's one way to think about it. It's a pretty, I think, it's an interesting word. And I think as we continue down this path of life, if we can really try to understand what that means, what does that mean for interceding? And I think it will help us to go to him, because the word, according to the Greek, is this word. It means to light upon a person or a thing, to fall in with, to hit upon, to go to or meet a person for the purpose of conversation, consultation, or supplication, to pray, to entreat, to make intercession. Again, that word. So this is what Jesus is doing for us with his Father. And kind of this definition right here makes me want to come to him because like I said, he's been tempted like I have, and he's doing this. So it's a deep word, a deep meaning, but something to think about. So going forward, into what else is he doing? We talked about this verse last week. Jesus Christ is the same yesterday and today and forever. Hebrews 13, verse 8. So I think a good place to begin to understand what Jesus is doing today is to look into what he did yesterday or 2,000 years ago. So that's what we'll do this evening. Try to draw some lessons from the accounts we have written in the scriptures. If we can turn to John chapter 1. And can I have a volunteer to read? John chapter 1, verse 35 through 42. Or do you usually go around the circle? Do you have a...
Either way, I'll go ahead and read this one. But
Okay.
John 1, 35 through 42. Again, the next day, John was standing with two of his disciples, and he looked at Jesus as he walked and said, "Behold, the Lamb of God." The two disciples heard him speak, and they followed Jesus. And Jesus turned and saw them following and said to them, "What do you seek?" They said to him, "Rabbi," which translated means teacher, "where are you staying?" He said to them, "Come, and you will see." So they came and saw where he was staying, and they stayed with him that day, for it was about the 10th hour. One of the two who heard John speak and followed him was Andrew, Simon Peter's brother. He found first his own brother Simon and said to him, "We have found the Messiah," which translated means Christ. He brought him to Jesus. Jesus looked at him and said, "You are Simon, the son of John. You shall be called Cephas," which is translated Peter.
Thank you. So I want us to imagine this. Simon and Jesus have never met, ever. And Jesus comes up to Simon and says, Simon, son of John. He knew his father's name. And he said, you will now be called Cephas, which means rock. That's basically like me coming up to Frank. I've never met Frank and said, Frank, you will now be called Isykros, which means strong because of your military background. Right? You were in the military, right, Frank?
Alas, no.
Oh, I thought you were. I'm sorry. But still, you're very strong. Very strong. I can tell.
Orders and everything.
So just imagine what Simon must have thought. Simon has never met Jesus, and he knows, he says, I'll call you Rock now. He changed his name. And you can imagine what Simon thought. If we can read this next passage, John 1, can I have a volunteer to read verse 47 and 48?
I'll read it. Jesus saw Nathanael coming to him and said of him, Behold, an Israelite indeed, in whom is no guile. Nathanael said unto him, Whence knowest thou me? Jesus answered and said unto him, Before that Philip called thee, when thou wast under the fig tree, I saw thee.
This is the equivalent of me never meeting Jotham and saying, Jotham, a true New Zealander. Philip and Jesus had never met. And here Jesus is, a true Israelite. You can imagine what Nathanael thought. He said, how do you know me? I want to kind of show a quick video. As you may know now, I enjoy videos. And some people don't like seeing portrayals of Jesus, but I think this is very helpful. I think it helps kind of solidify in our brain of what this may have been like. This is from a movie called The Gospel of John, which I highly recommend. It goes verse by verse. It doesn't stray from the book at all. And I think it's a pretty good portrayal. So let's watch these scenes kind of unfold.
The next day, John was standing there again with two of his disciples when he saw Jesus walking by. There's the Lamb of God. The two disciples heard him say this and went with Jesus. Jesus turned, saw them following him.
What are you looking for? Where do you live? Rabbi.
This word means teacher.
Come and see.
It was then about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, so they went with him and saw where he lived and spent the rest of that day with him. One of them was Andrew, Simon Peter's brother. At once he found his brother Simon.
We have found the Messiah.
This word means Christ. Then he took Simon to Jesus. Jesus looked at him.
Your name is Simon, son of John. But you will be called Cephas.
This is the same as Peter and means a rock. The next day, Jesus decided to go to Galilee. He found Philip. and said to him,
Come with me.
Philip was from Bethsaida, the town where Andrew and Peter lived.
How does it sound?
Yeah, it's okay. It's not the best, but it's okay.
Okay, let me get my speaker real quick. 1 second. All right. And think about this. This should help.
Yeah, the video's a little bit jerky too. Last week
Oh, really?
was a little jerky tonight.
Oh, man. Oh, did you go away?
No, stop sharing your screen.
Okay. Here we go. Share screen. Bear with me. All right, we'll hold off on the video for now. So, of course, Nathaniel says, "How do you know me?" And like I said, we can imagine what Nathaniel and Simon thought. Let's also read this passage, John 4, verse 16 through 18, please.
Jesus said unto her, Go, call thy husband and come hither. The woman answered and said, I have no husband. Jesus said unto her, Thou hast well said, I have no husband. For thou hast had 5 husbands, and he whom thou now hast is not thy husband. And that saidest thou truly.
Not only did Jesus know that this woman had no current husband, but she had had 5 husbands in the past. They had never met. Let's read one more passage to kind of help us understand what he's doing today. Luke 22, please, verse 32 and 34.
I can read it, 32 through 34. But I have prayed for you that your faith may not fail, and you, when once you have turned again, strengthen your brothers. But he said to him, Lord, with you I am ready to go both to prison and to death. And he said, I say to you, Peter, the rooster will not crow today until you have denied 3 times that you know me.
So well-known passage. Here Jesus knows that Simon is going to, Peter now, is going to betray him before he does. And so, sorry, now there we go. So, and he knew that he would turn again. He knew that one day he would turn and strengthen his brothers. What does this mean for us? Right? Well, like we said, like Hebrews 13 says, he's the same today. Unfortunately, Alaric is not here this evening, but hopefully he watches it on video. You know, and Dana and Alaric know each other, right? They know about each other, but they don't know each other like Jesus knows them. And that's there's things about us that no one knows, that deep dark secrets that are even, our family. Is Jemima there tonight?
Yep.
Your sister, right? Your sister. She's your sister. She has to know about you, right? No. The thing is, she doesn't know you like Jesus knows you. Thank God. Thank God that he sent his son, and his son knows everything about us. And I'm just now starting to kind of understand this in my life. If you can read John 16, verse 30 and 31. So how much does Jesus know, right? I mean, like, these are some verses that helps me understand what he's doing today. I'll read this. John 16, verse 30 says, "Now we know that you know all things and do not need anyone to question you. This is why we believe that you came from God." Jesus answered them, "Do you now believe?" So these are his disciples near the end of Jesus' life. They spent 3 years with him. And I feel like they finally said, "Now we know that you know all things." John 21:17 reads this way. Jesus is talking to Simon Peter and says, he said to him the third time, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" Peter was grieved because he said to him the third time, "Do you love me?" And he said to him, "Lord, you know everything. And I know that you know that I love you." So Peter also finally begins to understand that Jesus knows everything. How about these verses in Revelation? This is Jesus speaking. This is after he's risen. "I know your works," Revelation 2, verse 2 and 3. "Your toil and your patient endurance." I believe this is to us. "And how you cannot bear with those who are evil, but have tested those who have called themselves apostles and are not, and found them to be false. I know you are enduring patiently and bearing up for my name's sake, and you have not grown weary. I know your tribulation and your poverty, but you are rich." It's Revelation 2. Revelation 2, verse 19, he says, "I know your works, your love and faith and service and patient endurance, and that your latter works exceed the first." There's two words Jesus said oftentimes, many times in the scriptures. Does anyone have a guess of what they might be? It's not "I know." Well, it might be. But this is another two words he says.
Truly, truly.
Truly, truly. I'm sure he says that a lot. Hi, Jotham. What do you think about that? No, these two words he says many times. Follow me. Follow me. Follow me. Follow me. Follow me. Follow me to the glory of my Father. Follow me. Follow me. Follow me. Follow me. He says it so many times. And I used to think that I had to be perfect, get my life in order, never sin, and then follow Jesus, and then come to him. But Jesus wants to be there. Jesus wants to be in our life to help us. He said this to fishermen, to tax collectors, to sinners. He said, "Follow me." And as we know, many said, "Okay, yes." He said, I will help you. Learn from me. Let's read this passage. Luke chapter 5, verse 5 through 10. So I used to think, like I said, that I couldn't follow Jesus and come to him with my sinful nature and my thoughts, the way I would think. But this passage helps me understand what Jesus is like today. Have a volunteer to read chapter 5, verse 1 through 10.
I'll do it.
Thank you.
That while the multitude were pressing around him and listening to the word of God, he was standing by the lake of Gennesaret. And he saw two boats lying at the edge of the lake, but the fishermen had gone out of them and were washing their nets. And he got into one of the boats, which was Simon's, and asked him to put out a little way from the land. And he sat down and began teaching the multitudes from the boat. When he had finished speaking, he said to Simon, "Put out into the deep water and let down your nets for a catch." And Simon answered and said, "Master, we worked hard all night and caught nothing, but at your bidding we let down the nets." When they had done this, they enclosed a great quantity of fish, and their nets began to break. And they signaled to their partners in the other boat for them to come and help them. And they came and filled both of the boats so that they began to sink. When Simon Peter saw that, he fell down at Jesus' feet, saying, "Depart from me, for I am a sinful man, O Lord." For amazement had seized him and all his companions because of the catch of fish which they had taken. And so also James and John, sons of Zebedee, who were partners with Simon. And Jesus said to Simon, "Do not fear, from now on you will be catching men."
Thank you. And I didn't write this down, but verse 11 as well. When they had brought their boats to land, they left everything and followed him. One thing I want to point out is in verse 3, when 3 and 4, when Jesus says, "Put down your nets." I mean, he said this is Simon. Simon is a professional fisherman. And, he knows fish probably better than anyone, right? Jesus knows fish better. Jesus said, "Put into your deep and let down your nets for a catch." It's an interesting thing, and Simon did. But then, this is what I want to draw attention to. Verse 8, Simon says, "Depart from me. I'm a sinful man, O Lord." And like I said, I do this often. I say, he can't be there. He can't be there. But as we see in verse 10, not only does Jesus say, "Don't be afraid. From now on, you will be catching men." So not only does Jesus want to be there in our lives, to help us fight sin, but he has work for us to do. And I think Peter, when Simon Peter said, "Depart from me," I think he was saying, I'm not worthy to follow you. And I believe Jesus says, "You're right. We're really not worthy, but to have him work with us and to be near us, but he wants to be there." Let's turn to Luke 24, verse 28 through 30. I'll read this first. So Luke 24, starting in verse 28. So they drew near to the village to which they were going. And he acted, this is Jesus, as if he were going farther. But they urged him strongly, saying, "Stay with us, for it is toward evening, and the day is now far spent." So he went in to stay with them. Verse 30, when he was at the table with them, he took the bread and blessed it and broke it and gave it to them. This was after Jesus was risen from dead. And I want to draw attention to the fact that they urged him to stay with him. We sing it. We sing a hymn sometimes, and I'm sure you may have heard it, "Abide with me." Abide with me. That's asking him to stay with us. I've just recently discovered this, that Jesus accepts invitations and he wants us to invite him in. Even though oftentimes he can't be there. He knows I'm going to sin tomorrow. He knows exactly what I'm going to do. He told Peter, "You're going to deny me in the future." So he knows I'm going to sin next week, what I'm going to do. And oftentimes I say, "Depart from me, Lord." He wants me to invite him in these dark days and the addictions and the things I'm fighting. He wants me to let him in while I'm fighting, and he will fight with me. And I felt this in my life, my friends. I felt him, an undeniable power and strength that is not my own. And of course, in verse 29, he went in to stay with them. So he went in to stay with them. When he was at the table with them, he took the bread and blessed and broke it and gave it to them. And then they recognized him. So if we want to get to know him better, I think we first need to invite him in. And I believe then we will begin to recognize him. As verse 31 says, Luke 24:31, their eyes were opened and they recognized him. And he vanished, of course. He wanted them to continue to follow him and ask him for help. So I want to talk about this word know, right? Because we can know about something. I can know about, people, or I can know when Jesus lived. He lived, 2,000 or so years ago. He was 33 years old. And that's this word. we have this, it's good to get beneath the English. The word know in the Bible means different things. And sometimes it means this, gnosis, it's, knowing about. It's your academic knowledge. But all the verses we just read about how Jesus knows, the revelation, I know your works, is this know. Ido, I think you pronounce it. You see it. Properly to see, to be aware, to behold. When Peter says, Lord, you know everything, this is what he was saying. He says, you ido everything. There's another know I want to talk about that talks about when Paul would say, I want to know my Lord Jesus more. It was this word. I'm not sure how to pronounce it. But can you see a difference between the top know? This is the know that is used when Jesus says, I know your works, and the bottom know. Do you see any words that pop out that are different? So the top know was the word used for when Jesus said, I know your works. And when Peter said, Lord, you know everything. That's the top know. The bottom know is a know we're going to talk about in a few verses. Do you see any differences in the definition? I'll give you a hint. That word stands out to me. Allow. To feel. I don't think it's not an academic knowledge, right? I think studying about Jesus, to read about him, is extremely important. It should help us to allow him, to let him in, to invite him in. Ephesians 3, let's turn to that. This is when I started my study of the word know, because the know is an English word, and we say, I know. We use it for many different words, many different contexts. We can turn to Ephesians 3. Can someone please read for me? Let's read 14 through 21. Well, actually 13 through 19.
So I ask you not to lose heart over what I am suffering for you, which is your glory. For this reason, I bow my knees before the Father, from whom every family in heaven and on earth is named, that according to the riches of his glory, he may grant you to be strengthened with power through his Spirit in your inner being, so that Christ may dwell in your hearts through faith, that you being rooted and grounded in love may have strength to comprehend with all the saints what is the breadth and length and height and depth, and to know the love of Christ that surpasses knowledge, that you may be filled with all the fullness of God.
Okay, thank you. So Paul is praying here. He's praying, bowing my knees before God, the Father, that he may give us strength to comprehend this, to understand this. In verse 17 says, so that Christ may dwell in our hearts. This is from the easy to read version, which is sometimes my favorite, but sometimes it can be dangerous because it really kind of changes the words quite a bit. So you always got to double check. But I want to read verse 18 and 19 to the ERV, the easy to read version. Paul is praying, and I pray that you and all God's holy people will have the power to understand the greatness of Christ's love, how wide, how long, how high, and how deep that love is. Christ's love is greater than anyone could ever know, but I pray that you will be able to know that love. Huh? That's when I read this version, that's what started my study of the word know. If we see, I said, how can I know a love that I can not know? As we go beneath the English, this first know is that middle note, gnosis. Paul is saying Jesus Christ's love is greater than anyone could ever know. He said, you can't know. But I pray that you will be able to know that love. That it doesn't mean know about. It's that last no we looked at. To allow. And for many years, my friends, I never did this. I like I said, I pushed him away. He couldn't be there. I'm beginning to allow him, and my life has changed. And this is why I'm giving this class, which I appreciate Ray asking me to give. Paul in Philippians 3, this no pops up again. This last no, allow. Philippians 3, verse 8 through 11, Paul says, indeed, I count everything as lost because of the surpassing worth of knowing Christ Jesus my Lord. For his sake, I have counted the loss of all things and count them as rubbish, in order that I may gain Christ and be found in him. And that word in is an active verb. It's to abide with, to stay with him and have him stay with us. To the good times and the bad times. Not having a righteousness of my own that comes from the law, but that which comes through faith in Christ. So having trust and having faith in Jesus Christ is the only way to be made right with his Father, the righteousness from God that depends on faith. And here's this no again, that I may know him. That word means to allow, to experience him in the power of his resurrection, and may share his sufferings, becoming like him in his death. So Paul always talked about allowing Jesus and not allowing Paul. He said, I do not want this to be about Paul. I want to allow Jesus and put to death Paul so that I can be raised from dead. The next verse, verse 12.
Oops. Just lost him. He should have reconnected a second.
Like interesting older video.
Okay. Okay, you're back.
I'm back. All right. Well, that's perfect.